In today's video, we're taking a look at some trade talk involving the St. Louis Blues, the Edmonton Oilers, the Pittsburgh Penguins, plus should the Senators revisit the Jacob Chychrun deal with Arizona now that they're on a losing streak and need to get things back on track in a hurry. Plus, we're going to take a look at the NHL waiver wire, some news on the World Cup, and some injury updates in Columbus. All that coming up next. So welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. As I mentioned, we have a variety of NHL news and some trade talk today to take a look at. First up, we do have some more news from the NHL waiver wire. Yesterday, we had goaltender Laurent Brossoit on waivers from the Vegas Golden Knights. He indeed did clear, so they've now assigned him to the American Hockey League down in Henderson. So Brossoit will remain with Vegas. I'm sure he was an interesting option on an expiring contract for some teams, but the fact that he's returning from a long-term serious injury probably scared teams off, I would think. Today we have the Florida Panthers placing forward Rudy Balcers on waivers. They're trying to make room on their roster to activate Aaron Ekblad, who's expected to return this weekend, which obviously is a big boost in the back end for Florida. A very important player for them, but Balcers, I think, is going to be a player that's going to be a high chance of getting picked up. Lots of teams, I think, could benefit from a player who can play up and down your lineup like he can. Not really a whole lot of term or money involved. I think the risk associated would be pretty low for most teams, so I would not be shocked if he gets claimed, but we'll find out tomorrow afternoon. The NHL announced today as well that the World Cup that they were hoping to host in 2024 is not happening now. It's been delayed by at least 1 year. Now they're kind of punting it down the road, so to speak, and are going to make another attempt for 2025, citing that the current environment just isn't feasible to have the tournament in place and make it work. So ultimately, I know part of this is that they're concerned, obviously, with what's going on in Russia, between Russia and Ukraine. Obviously, having the Russians not participate is, in some ways makes a ton of sense, but it does make the tournament less, a lot weaker in a sense, and eliminates a lot of NHL players from participating. I don't know exactly what all's factored in, but I'm sure that's probably part of it for sure. Although it's hard to say with any kind of certainty that things resolve over there and the kind of, sporting world accepts Russia back into things like this again that quickly. I really have no idea. I wouldn't think that would be too likely, but you just never know, I guess. So either way, they're making us wait longer, which has been a long time since we have had a really, truly world best on best tournament at this level. So we'll have to see what happens, but obviously getting it together in time for 2024, we knew from the get-go was going to be a challenge, but it's very unfortunate it's definitely not happening now, but hopefully 2025 they can get it to go. The Columbus Blue Jackets have really been beaten and battered up, and now they lose their top defenseman for the rest of the year. Zach Werenski, with a really serious injury, suffers a separated shoulder and torn labrum, done for the year. That's bad news. They also moved Adam Boqvist to long-term injury reserve. In the same game where Werenski got hurt, Nick Blankenberg apparently had a broken ankle, was playing on it for a long time, didn't even know. They had already lost other defensemen too as well, which we're waiting for further updates on. So it's bad in Columbus. Voracek and Corrali also on IR right now. This team is really battered and beaten up, but losing your top D, Werenski, for the season, they've just become, I think, they were already kind of in the picture because they were having a real tough start to the year, but they're now in the Connor Bedard sweepstakes for sure. I would think that losing all those players, it's at some point, I think it's tough for players to want to. I'm sure players never want to lose because that's not in their DNA typically. But at some point, you have to wonder what's best for the organization, and sometimes getting that top pick, is beneficial, right? Not that I've ever really been, supportive of tanking, but there are times when it does make sense. So we'll see what Columbus and how they react to this. But that's a lot of players out, and a beaten and battered team that's already struggling even with some of these guys in the lineup. So we'll see how Jarmo Kekalainen reacts here and what kind of decisions they make moving forward. Now, onto the rumor mill of some talk from Elliot Friedman in the latest 32 Thoughts podcast, talking about the St. Louis Blues. Of course, the Blues have been one of the handful of teams that have been hardcore struggling recently. They did pick up a win recently in their last game, but still overall the season's not looking great. Believes that Doug Armstrong is looking for some trades right now. He's made it clear that Craig Berube likely isn't going anywhere anytime soon, and that a roster shakeup is way more likely. Friedman says his sources lead him to think that they're looking for a defenseman and a forward, possibly a forward. Maybe somebody with some bite to add to that lineup. And he thinks that Arizona Coyotes forward Nick Ritchie, of course, has a big body who's been scoring goals since arriving in the desert, might be a good match. He didn't really get things together in Toronto during that brief experiment, but since he's been to Arizona the rest of last year and the start of this year, Ritchie's actually done relatively well. A lot of goals in the power play, as well. So, which is something he just couldn't do in Toronto. It's unfortunate things didn't work out. That experiment didn't last too long, but of course, teams sometimes just don't have the ability to be too patient when there's so much at stake, especially when you're in a win-now mode like the Leafs are. But Ritchie could be a target for St. Louis. Hard to say who on the blue line they might target. They have in the past been linked to Jacob Chychrun as well. I don't know if they'd want to go down that road given the high price tag right now. But with guys like Tarasenko and O'Reilly, they would not be interesting to Arizona. But they are certainly a couple of names that we talked about here in the last couple of days as some high-profile UFAs that could get moved if they don't think they're going to re-sign and be a part of the team's future, which is up in the air right now, right? And so until there's a contract, there's always going to be some speculation around those players, no doubt. Hard to say where the Blues go, but they very well might have themselves a trade partner in Arizona. Wouldn't be shocking if that, looked at being either a single or multiplayer deal. So we'll have to see. Some talk around the Edmonton Oilers or whether or not they're going to try to replace Evander Kane, who's going to be out for about 4 months. Obviously, that gives him a chance to come back before the end of the season, right? But of course, at this rate, that's just an estimate. There's some people saying they should Kucherov him. I know that obviously the Tampa Bay Lightning were accused of keeping players in LTIR until they get to the playoffs. With Kucherov returning game 1, looked great. You will never prove that anything happened that it shouldn't have, but obviously a lot of people thought that it did. I really don't know. But at the same time, will Kane legitimately, maybe take a little bit longer? He had a pretty serious injury, and estimates are just estimates. They don't always get back on time. Most feel that there's a good chance they're going to probably look internally to start. Maybe see youngster Dylan Holloway, or if they can finally get like Yamamoto or Puljujarvi to maybe step up to a more consistent role, that might be something that they look at. And depending on how the next little bit goes, they may start to look externally if that's not working out. But it's going to be challenging, given the fact, like I said, do they keep Kane out the rest of the year? Will he be out? There's so many question marks there that waiting until later in the season seems more realistic, just given a chance that the longer they go, the better idea they'll have on his ability to return or not, or what have you. So we'll see. But, they could replace Kane, but it's not going to be easy unless he's done for the year. And now an article, too, I want to take a look at quickly from the hockey news by Adam Proto, talking about should the Senators revisit the Jacob Chychrun trade. We know the Senators were, for the longest time, the top team linked to the Coyotes defenseman, with lots of speculation, and it was a matter of time. Lots of negotiations were taking place, but ultimately that the price tag was just too high, and the Sens and Pierre Dorian just wouldn't pull the trigger, which understandably so. But as the season has now started, they're in a bit of a slump, a losing streak. The decor is a big part of the problem. Could they revisit that, and should they revisit that? And this article suggests that they should, but they also suggest in this article that Shane Pinto being part of the asking price before, that even though he looks like he's an emerging center off to a good start, that it'd be worth it. And I totally disagree with that. I think the only way Ottawa considers a Chychrun deal, one, the price tag does have to come down a bit, and it has to be mainly future picks and a prospect or something that's not already in the NHL. To me, Shane Pinto's a non-starter. I mean, he's already leading this team arguably in a lot of ways. So why would you move him? That takes you, a step back. And to me, Chychrun's a high-risk acquisition. With an injury history, he has yet to play this year. I just don't see a deal going down there where he doesn't play for a while first and establish himself and show what he can be again. It's always a kind of what have you done for me lately type of thing. And last year wasn't great for Chychrun. He's still out for an injury that, it's something that should have been, at least we were led to believe should have been recovered from by now. I wonder if they are just kind of holding him out with the, trade that they're looking to find. I really don't know. I don't have any proof of that, but it makes you wonder, right? But Ottawa, I think they should revisit looking for D. I think Pierre Dorian's doing that, as we've talked about in recent days with, there's defensemen between Winnipeg, Vancouver, etc. that kind of makes sense. Chychrun does make some sense, but not unless the price comes down, and there's no way I would include Shane Pinto. So we'll see where things go. They have to do something, though, and soon to stop the bleeding. Pittsburgh Hockey Now also has an article suggesting that it's time for the Penguins to part ways with Kasperi Kapanen, that re-signing him to a 2-year deal in the offseason was a mistake, and he hasn't really done anything yet this year to earn it. got off to a decent start the first few games, but he's barely been in a big slump ever since, and he's even been a healthy scratch in their most recent game where they won against Washington. So, the only problem is it's hard to move players with contract term, and not that the money's outrageous, because it's not, but especially with another year on it when you're not performing, it's not easy. I mean, there's some debate, should they even put him on waivers and consider burying the contract? It gives him a little bit of cap relief, frees up a roster spot, but is it really enough? That contract is not looking good right now. Yet it is early, but Kapanen's been terribly inconsistent since returning to the Penguins. Had a real nice run with the Maple Leafs where he was kind of building up to being what everybody thought was a bigger name for himself and kind of building his his abilities. And then he gets back to Pittsburgh where they think, okay, well, he's ready to take on a bigger role now and be a bigger star. And it just never worked out. At least not, he had his moments like a lot of players do. Never any consistency, and for the most part played in the bottom six, which is not what you wanted from Kapanen. I mean, he played the third line a lot with the Leafs, but that was the whole point. Is he showed a lot of promise, a lot of skill that could be better used if played in a bigger role. And Pittsburgh thought he could do that. And of course, they have a different guys leading that team now because that was a Jim Rutherford trade. So I don't know. They paid a big price to bring him back too, and then of course re-signed him, and it's not working out. So as much as I do agree with the sentiment that things aren't working out and they should try to explore a fresh start for him, the contract's going to prove very problematic. A lot of deals right now in the NHL that players you do see typically are shorter terms, and 1 year left, you can retain some money, take a chance, low risk, but when there's multiple years on it, it becomes problematic. So hard to say if they can find a hockey trade, like a 1-for-1 swap. Maybe swap struggling players from another team, similar spot. I don't know. We'll have to wait and see where things go. But I do agree that something has to give, and he certainly could benefit from a move. But we'll see what happens. That is all your news and rumors for today. Of course, as always, if you're new to the channel, make sure you subscribe and stick around. We'll keep you up to date with all the latest news, rumors, and analysis of all 32 NHL teams. Thank you for watching, and I'll catch you next time.